Today on Bearing Up, we're discussing key components of getting the youth involved in ministry.
And we'll also be sharing ministry tasks that work well for different ages.
Welcome back, everyone, to Bearing Up. I'm Zack Griffin, the host of this show, and with me today is Noah Icenhour. He is a returning guest, and I'm so grateful to have him back on. He's the minister at the Enola Church of Christ. And where's Enola again?
It is just outside of Conway, Arkansas, kind of Little Rock metro area.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Well, it's good to have you, man. How are you?
Oh, doing great, man. Just preparing for the summer to do all these tasks for youth. So
Yeah, it's a timely topic that we have today because kids are getting out of school. They've got time. There's youth ministers that they probably got a good plan already. But
yeah,
if not, maybe they could take some of the things that we're talking about today. I think this discussion that we have is going to be great for those involved in youth ministry, youth leaders, parents, anybody in the church. I think there used to be a saying, and I don't think we use the saying as often as maybe we should sometimes, but, the saying, it takes a village,
mm-hmm.
And really, our youth in the church, there needs to be a lot of supports that they have. They have their parents, they have their Bible class teachers, they have the youth minister, they have all of that. But the congregation needs to be supporting them. And we are talking about today getting the youth involved in ministry. Ministry's been pretty much our topic this season. We've been focusing in particularly on ministering in different ways. And so I'm very grateful to have you, Noah, to have this discussion. Now, are you the pulpit minister there?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And that's why this subject actually piqued my interest. You gave me kind of a list of things we could talk about, is because as the preaching minister, I feel it is incredibly important to be involved in the lives of the youth. That way you're not just the guy standing up there on Sunday. And some of my just like things I've been involved with have carried over as I've gone from, I was a youth and associate minister before, and, I'm still involved in some of those works. I didn't drop them all. I'm work on the board at camp and direct a week there. Going to take a second week this summer. And so all those things I feel have kind of kept me connected, especially with the youth in our own congregation, and I think that's invaluable for preaching ministers who kind of think, well, that's not my job. It's not my job to minister to the youth. And no, actually it is, because you're still the minister of the congregation, and the youth are included in that.
That's right. And I think that, it's so important that, for the preacher, he's got to build connections. If people are going to look at him and him be more than a preacher, more than somebody that just gets up and speaks, but somebody that can actually minister and that they can see as somebody that they can go to and talk to, or be friends with, or different things like that. That's why preachers go and they visit older folks in the congregation, people in the hospital. They try to build those connections, but we can't ignore the youth too. They need to, because it's easy to think, well, the kids aren't listening, right? They're not listening to my sermon. But it's funny how, even some of our 7 and 8-year-olds, they'll hear me say something at the pulpit, and they'll look up at their parents, or they'll say to their Bible class teacher after the sermon, we talked about that. We talked about what Mr. Zack said in class. And it's they are listening, and they'll listen better if we have good relationships with them.
If you've listened to them, right? If
you've
taken time to talk with them and to listen to them, where they know who you are, there's a relationship there, and more likely to listen to what you have to say. I also think it's important. Do y'all have a youth minister?
No, it's just me. So
Just you.
Yeah.
So it's part-time here. So it's kind of similar. Like we have a part-time youth minister here. He does an incredible job. Uh, but even congregations with a full-time guy, I think this is still an important conversation. And in that case, you need to coordinate with the youth minister so it doesn't look like you're trying to sideline him or anything like that. But it should be a partnership, and vice versa. The youth minister inevitably is going to be involved in the elderly, the congregation. Like, you're not going to stay in those lines. But I think a healthy church is going to have the youth minister and the preacher working together on some of this, with obviously the youth minister taking the key lead on the agenda for the youth ministry, along with the elders, of course. But I do think there has to also be that coordination between preacher and youth minister. Like here, it's just like, we're on the same side. We're trying to accomplish the same things. And so he takes the lead, but I try to support him and assist and help in any way I can, like in our VBS or whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah, there's got to be a team. It's a team effort. You know? And maybe that's, it's including the elders, the preacher, youth minister. We've got a couple here deacons. We don't have deacons currently, but we've got, people that are kind of doing the work of deacons, in a way. Mm-hmm. And so, we got those individuals that really step up, parents, those things. So, we're going to talk about, we've got 4, key components, that we have, and maybe there'll be some more. We'll get to talking, and there'll be some things. And so for the first half of this episode, we're going to talk about some key components about getting the youth involved, and then the second half, we're going to look at different age groups and see what some sort of ideas. I guess we're going to share our thoughts on some things that these different age groups can do to actually get them involved in ministry. So it's one thing to say, here's some principles, and it's another idea, because a lot of people just say, well, what can we do? I know that they need to be involved. I know we need to get them involved, but what are some things that we can do? And so I'm looking forward to that part of our discussion as well. But so let's break this down. We've got some key components here. And number one, we're going to talk about being proactive about involvement. And what I mean by that is that we're talking to the adults. We're talking to the adults on this. And it's because sometimes we feel like that if the kids want to do something, they'll say it. But that's just not a reality. I mean, like, that's kids aren't going to say, "Hey, let's do this ministry." I mean, maybe if they are already involved in a lot of ministry tasks and they have been trained because they've been involved so much. But if there's very little involvement and there's not very much organization to it, you're never going to find a child that says, "Hey, let's do this. Let's organize this big thing and go help this person, or go do this service project, or, hey, put me to work." I don't think that's, and even if they say, "Hey, put me to work," which I feel like is probably a rare thing, they're not going to know what to do, or where to go, or what opportunities there are to serve. So the adults have to be proactive. It's kind of like, I think about mentorships. No child is going to come up to you and say, "Hey, can you be my mentor?" It's just not going to happen. You have to have individuals to take people under their wing. I have people like that here, and I'm almost 30 years old, and I have members of the congregation that they took it upon themselves to sort of mentor me, and encourage me. So you have to kind of work on trying to be proactive, leading kids.
This has always amazed me, even probably since I was in high school. Every congregation I've been with, there's kind of this attitude among adults, like the kids ought to take initiative on this, and or our kids just aren't involved these days, or they don't want to be a part of anything, or they don't come up to us and greet us or talk to us or anything like that. And so how can there be, healthy relationships between generations. And that's ultimately the goal, right? And we've done that fairly well among churches of Christ. We're very congregational. We're very intergenerational. Part of that is because, like at Enola, for instance, you have so many members who are all related together. So they're at family gatherings. So it's a close-knit congregation where younger generations are very connected with the older generation here. And that's a blessing. That's not true of every church, but that's a blessing here.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think that is particularly true among churches of Christ, which I think is great. But sometimes the adults expect that burden to be on the kids to come and to like minister to them. And that just seems so weird to me, like why you would ever assume it is the kids' responsibility to come and to minister to you spiritually or to get you involved, as if that could ever fall on their plate of responsibility. And so that's always seemed odd to me. But what you're saying is right. This is an adult job. This is a stronger Christian to the weaker Christian job to seek out relationship with young people and ultimately to create those opportunities for them to be involved. A kid is not a child psychologist. A kid can't look and see, here's the things I need to be doing at this age that'll help me grow spiritually or to help me grow emotionally or relationally, right? Whose job is that? That's for adults to look into, to know what type of things kids need to be doing, especially when we get to the end here, the age-appropriate ministering and all that. That's not up for a kid to decide.
No.
Maybe you're not going to send a 5-year-old to Haiti on a mission trip, but you might, involve them in visiting the nursing home, those type of things. But obviously that's not up for a kid to be able to determine those type of things. It takes parent involvement, it takes adults who are in leadership and planning and coordination with whoever is involved in the youth program, and definitely falls on the adult side of things.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of I have a lot of friends that live far away, like Noah, and
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes, wow, I haven't talked to this so and so in so long, and they haven't called me. Well, I haven't called
Yeah,
them either, right?
that's right.
So so there has to be recognizing, okay, if this is going to happen, then I have to do it.
Sure.
Sometimes we may think that, oh well, this is their job or such and such a job, and I was talking about this recently with the congregation here in Moultrie about the roles that people have, and some of our roles about just clerical things and things that need to be done. We have a group of ladies that always does such a good job, with the organization and cleanup of the fellowship meals and all of that stuff, and you got teachers and you got all these other things. And what happens though when they get to be older and they just you know
Mm-hmm.
who's going to step up, and it will take, when those people get older, it'll have to take people stepping up and saying, oh, this is my job now. And I feel like it's like that for, we could say, well, it's this person's job. And maybe you have a youth minister and you're like, well, what's the youth minister there for? you know but
Mm-hmm.
being proactive can be, hey, I think this is a good idea. Why don't we, talking with the ministers and saying, I see that this is a particular need. What can we do to get this started? I think
Yeah.
that's being proactive. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking the youth program by the horns and you are trying to take over. Being
Yeah.
proactive just means that you're doing something. You're saying something about how the youth can be involved more, and particularly with the leaders. Again, you can't wait on the kids to say something about it. you know
Yeah.
you've got to
And
you've got to lead them to that.
I like what you said there about, whether it's someone who is in charge of the fellowship meals or whatever, bringing someone with you to start showing them kind of how to do it,
Mm-hmm.
things that need to be done and all that. You're kind of mentoring someone, even if it's not a kid, you're mentoring someone to eventually take over those jobs, whether it be the youth or whatever, uh, which is why it's so important to start young, is to start preparing people, even as kids or teens, perhaps teens who are already Christians that, whether they are or not, but to start doing tasks around the church that are involved in ministry. You know, we have a very special group at our week of camp who, it's particularly, all of our counselors are pretty young. And at first that kind of scared me. It's like, oh, we need some adult supervision here. Like,
Yeah.
But they're phenomenal. I mean, they're just so good because all of them grew up in this area. They all grew up with these opportunities for ministry
Yeah.
that various people created for them. So you give them a task and it's like awesome. Like you just give it to them. You don't have to worry about it. It's done and it's awesome, whether it's some kind of game for the kids, whatever it is. But I've found myself with adults sometimes trying to involve them in ministry. And it's much more difficult because they didn't have it, a lot of adults didn't have someone who brought them in, showed them the ropes of something and how to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas these college kids have been doing it all through this time because this area is poured into our youth. And, you know, I'd rather give the task to the college kids sometimes because I know they've been brought along. Now, of course, you got to still create the opportunities. Some of this is going to be training adults to work with youth, and so there's that part of it. But my point is you can see the fruit of it even early on.
Yeah.
In this kind of coming into fruition with being able to minister well because they've been brought along the way, whereas even some older folks who should be more mature kind of look at you with blank stares when you ask them if they could help with something sometimes. So
Yeah. Well, I think this kind of leads us a little bit into our the next key component, and that is about knowing the group that you're leading. And like you have a group that, you know, a group of, you know, older, I guess they're probably like college age individuals that like grew up in the program and now they're able to be counselors. You know, you know, you should kind of look at the group that you're looking at, and are they kids? Are they young adults? You know, are they children that are highly involved already? Are they eager to do a lot of things? Are they kind of, you got like a fringe group of individuals, which sometimes happens, and sometimes it happens because they don't go to the youth events, or they you know, maybe aren't at services all the time. And sometimes you can have fringe groups. You have groups that are unenthusiastic. Are you kind of like coming into a program where there hasn't been anything done, and you're kind of just starting from square one, or you know, are you working at a place that there's always been, you know, we do this in the springtime, we do this in the fall, we do, you know, we have all of these things that we're always doing and they're always looking forward to them, you know. How do you approach each? And this is kind of a difficult one for me because we have a pretty big age gap. We've got like I said, when we were talking before we started recording here, we've got like 9 kids in the between the ages of 3 and 11, but I think 11's the highest, and then right under that is like we got a couple 8 and 9 year olds, and then we've got, you know, a few that are like Graham's age, 4 and 5, you know, somewhere around there. And then there's a gap. We have one junior in high school, and then we have like we have a junior and a senior in high school. And then we've got a few college age students, and sometimes they're fringe because they're not always there, and not really sure how to involve them and stuff. And so it's like, all right, how do you approach, you know, these groups of people, and what sort of things do you do? Because I think involvement is one of those things. It's like more involvement, and it doesn't matter how involved you are. I feel like maybe if it's to the point where you're doing something every day, maybe you're like, okay, I think we're involved enough. But I feel like involvement is always a thing that's being discussed. So what do you think, Noah?
So I'll just kind of go down the list there. So the best case scenario, right, is that, or at least when ministry is fun, okay, and I mean like it's just a blast, okay, is when you have a highly involved and eager group. Like And sometimes if you're coming into a work, that's going to be your younger kids probably, especially if something hasn't been being done or whatever, like it's to do with younger kids. But, if you've seen the youth groups, that it seems like they're doing everything. It's awesome. I worked with a youth group where, like you said, every day was planned. That was an internship. And it was great when it was awesome. The danger is with that side, and where you need to know the group you're leading, is even when they're highly involved and eager, the answer is not let's pack the event or pack every day with an event.
Yeah.
Your responsibility at that point is to strategically think about what is going to be the best use of time, money, and energy of our ministry and of our families. Right. If you go to an amusement park every day, right, your families are going to be thinking, hey, we don't have enough money for this, whatever. Yeah. So you got to think about all those things. But at the same time, be thinking strategically about spiritual health is, okay, are these events actually accomplishing what we want them to accomplish? Maybe you can break them up into categories of events that you might do. You might have a kind of more a teaching-focused event, then you might have a fun fellowship event, and you might have a service-oriented event each month and kind of break it down kind of like that. It can do some different things like that, but I think one of the dangers is when you do have that highly involved group is to just try to do everything, and ultimately you're going to run the danger of burning them out and then creating them that unenthusiasm, or you're going to burn out as the leader, or the families are going to burn out because they're never going to be spending time together. And that's another thing is, especially when you have those highly involved and eager groups, and probably with all of these, kind of my youth minister friends would probably be kind of smacking me on the wrist yet, but because I haven't said it, but it should be family oriented. Yeah. I think that's another way of creating margin for you, because if you're a youth minister and you have a family, or a youth worker at all, or if you're just a parent, then obviously, right, you have a family. It's going to create margin for you if your ministry is kind of family oriented. And if you have my kind of thing on it is in those type of groups, you got to make sure you watch out for the kids who don't have family in the church. You need to make sure they're spiritually adopted, brought in to some type of mentor relationship as well. But having that family-oriented ministry that is going to have some events take place in the home. Yeah. It may not be an event where you get together as the youth group, but something the youth program has planned as a curriculum for them to follow at home to help the parents be able to guide their kids and all that. So I guess my point is, in that first category, highly involved and eager, is just be strategic about it, though. Yeah. That's fun ministry when everybody wants to do it and everyone wants to be involved, but you still need to be strategic. Don't just let the fire hose go and spread it everywhere. Let's be very methodical about it and get the best fruit you can from it.
I guess the thing that I think of, the phrase that I like to use is forward momentum. Where are you going? What are you trying to accomplish with, the kind of involvement that you want to do? I will say, and you got to be particular about when you're talking about your group, knowing the group that you have. You might have to ease into the things that you'd really like for them to start doing. So maybe you say you have a group of young adults that you think would be great Bible class teachers one day. Well, how do you get them there? And what if you want to get them there and right now they're very unenthusiastic and don't really want to be involved in anything? Well, what is the pathway? What is the thing that you can do to get them there? Well, that might be the first step. How do I get them there? And you might have to focus in on events where your focus is about getting them there. Your focus is about getting them involved. And once that presence is starting to get developed more, and they're more routine in that, and they're looking forward to being together, then you can start. And I'm not saying to do just fun things that have nothing to do with Christianity or God, or I think that you can still throw devotionals in. You can do things like that are we are here for a reason. That sort of thing. Yeah. And then start moving into more spiritually uplifting things, and then start to get into service projects and stuff like that. Because let's say you have a group that's completely unenthused, and you say, hey, we're going to go pick up trash on the side of the road. I mean, they're probably going to say, "Oh, well, I have something going on." Right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, but if you've kind of developed relationships with them and developed that growth, um, that forward momentum, eventually you can start asking those things, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I'll be there." Like they don't even have to think about it; they have to check their calendar. Like, "Oh, we're going to be together, and we're going to be doing something good." You know, so
Yeah.
that's that's what I think I mean by knowing your group. You need to kind of think about the things that will get them involved, and do things that and I guess you could talk about ages too. Like you said, you're not going to send a 5-year-old over to Haiti. You want to do the age appropriate things. Um, you know, what age appropriateness is there to do? A church wide car wash day. What
Hmm.
ages would be appropriate to host a dinner for the seniors in the church? What would be appropriate for making cards for people? I mean, little kids can do that.
Right.
They can color on a sheet of paper and fold it in half, and there's a card. So I mean, just kind of knowing your group in that way as well.
Yeah. And them knowing you kind of too is gonna,
Hmm.
you know, kind of relationship is key
Yeah.
because you mentioned let's go pick up trash off the highway. All right, that's a hard sell if I don't know you.
Right.
Like if you're just like if I've just kind of come, like I hear you preach on Sundays, but if it's Zach, who you and I have a relationship and went to school together, you're like, yeah, man, yeah, I'll be glad to help. That's different. I'll tell a story real quick, just because I know Ben Hogan's been on the program
Hmm.
several times, and there was a time at Freed where we were planning. Chi Beta, our club, did this thing called mud, mud fight, but audience doesn't know. So we'd have this big mud pit. You had to go dig it out. It took forever to get this thing going each year. You had to go dig out this entire pit for like 170 college kids to run in, and so it has to be huge. And we were out of time. Like we didn't have time. It wasn't going to work. And so I came. I was just uh, on our floor where all of our guys lived, and I was just trying to grab as many people as I could. I need you out there. I need you out there. I need help. Got to get this done. It's not going to happen. The event's tomorrow. And I came into Ben Hogan's room, and and he was doing homework. He was like being a good student. Like this was like his sophomore year or whatever. Maybe I don't. Yeah, sophomore year. And I was trying to get him to come, and he just looked at me like he wasn't going to do it, like it wouldn't happen, and, because he was busy. He didn't not want to go dig in the mud, but then he did, and he told me later, like, the reason why I did, he said he saw a friend who was in need,
Yeah.
and I think there was a relationship there. We were friends, there's closeness, and
Yeah.
so
He
well,
wouldn't have
if
did it if
anyone,
anybody
just a
else.
random dude,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I think a lot of that is key is knowing your group. Well, yes, knowing like the way you meant it is kind of like knowing what they're going to be best at, how to get them involved, where they need to go.
Hmm.
That's all key. But also still having that relationship is going to be that's how you know
Yeah.
also knowing them and them knowing you is going to also be key to being involved.
Right. So relationship is key here. So all right. So number 3 is cultivate an environment where more adults are leading. And this is basically just the principle that if they don't see any adults doing anything, they're going to think, well, why do I have to do it? Why are we
Yeah.
doing service projects if there's not any adults that are going to get involved with it? And so when there are things like that, it's important that there are adults that their parents are doing it. There's a big attitude that often happens in churches where there's a need, and then it's like that would be something great for the youth to do, but the people that say that would never do it. you know
Yeah.
it's like, hey, yeah, that's y'all go do that, but they wouldn't lift a finger to help. Sometimes that's the case. Now there are some people that say that's something the youth can do, and then they're also there and they're helping too, and that's what we're talking about, is trying to it's not about we have a subsect of people that really need to be involved in ministry. We all as the church need to be involved in ministry. And so
Hmm.
it's more about how do we get the youth involved in the work of the church. It's not, because sometimes it's like the youth ministry can be kind of like, the youth is kind of its separate little junior kingdom, and it's kind of its own little thing over there. And a lot of times is when they start to get older, they graduate from high school and they're not going to the youth things anymore. They feel alienated because, well, they're not really in the youth and they're not really one of the adults either, and they just don't know really where to go. So there's not going to be interest in working or being involved if again they don't see their parents doing it, if they don't see other adults doing it. It's about bringing them into the church, the work of the church, and not saying, well, y'all go do this over here because y'all need to be busy and doing something good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to one of our church members this morning. He called and we just talked. We talk about once a week actually, and he's one of my big encouragers. But anyway, he's got a son who's older. He's my age, and I have Graham. We talk about being parents all the time. But we were talking about how it's at home. A child feels like they belong to the family when they feel like they're an asset to the family. When you give them responsibilities and you give them things like Graham, he's got responsibilities. He helps put his laundry away. He sets the table. He always puts he's got to put his shoes away in the right spot and put his laundry away. And he's got to do lots of things. He helps with the dishes sometimes. He helps me cook sometimes. Like he's got to put all the toys away before we go do something else. And I guess what I'm trying to do with him is help him to understand. And I will say, Graham, I'm so glad to have you a part of my family. I'm so glad that I have help around the house to make sure that everything gets done and picked up and put away. So he feels like he's a valued part of it because he's got his responsibilities and he feels like he belongs, even though right now it's just me and him. But the kids in the church, it works the same exact way. How are they going to feel like they belong to the church if we don't help them to feel like they belong by giving them responsibilities, by giving them roles, by letting them know, I don't know what this church would be without you and what you bring to the table. But that works. That only works when they're working side by side with the rest of the congregation in some way. And that's when the adults have to get involved. That's when the adults have to, they're leading and they're doing things. And when you can bring a kid along. And so that's why I think that it's great. I think it's a great thing to bring kids along with you to like the nursing homes and stuff like that. And, go visit the older folks. And maybe it's like you just go have a sing at one of the older members' houses, or, something like that. That's a ministry. That's service and encouragement. And that's something I'm hoping to do with Graham is, particularly him, but maybe I could start bringing some of the other kids too, to go visit with some of our older members and go sing with them and go sit with them and, things like that. So there's got to be a cooperation, I think.
Yeah. Any job you can have someone help you with it, and so bringing a young person along is invaluable because they get to see an example of a Christian servant doing it and accomplishing something and it being successful, and then they get to every time they do it, it seems more and more attainable for them to do. So
yeah, and a lot of times what will happen is they don't want to go at first, but after they do it, they're like, I'm glad I did that. But anyway, well, let's move on. We got one more, and maybe if you have anything else that you wanted to say, Noah, maybe now would be a good one before we do this last one and then have our mid-roll. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Um, no, I don't think I have anything in particular.
Okay, so um, let's move on then to number 4, and that is to keep Christ as the center of what you're doing. Um, you know, this is about that forward momentum that we're talking about. And one of the books that I think we probably both read at Freed Hardeman was Christ Centered Youth Ministry. Do you remember that? It was a red cover, and I think it had like a crown of
I think
thorns or
so.
something like that on the cover. But it was Christ Centered Youth Ministry. And the very beginning of that book, um, there was an illustration from Mark 2 that has stuck with me uh, continually through the years and has gone on to inspire me in evangelism and other areas of ministry. But the illustration in Mark 2 is you've got uh, the paralytic, and he's got this group of friends, and Jesus is in this house, and there's people crowding the house. They've all flooded in, and it's spilling out of the doorway, and this group says to themselves essentially, how do we get our friend to the feet of Jesus? Um, and so they use that illustration in this book on youth ministry to say, look, that's the goal. That's what we are all about when it comes to being involved with the youth. When we're trying to get them in to do things, or whether it is Bible class, or whether it is whatever it is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get those kids to the feet of Jesus. And so all of what we've talked about has to be built on that foundation, um, built on the foundation of, what is this all for? We want all of our kids to grow up and be Christians. And there's I don't know if you've heard this, maybe from Kids Sing or something like that, some programs. Uh, do you know what true success is? True success is living your life and going to heaven. And Glenn Colley does that with Kids Sing,
Uh-huh.
and it's something that we're going to be doing here, and we have done in the past. We ask, "What is true success?" And the kids answer back, "Living your life and going to heaven." True failure is living your life and not going to heaven. So it's we have to realize that ourselves if we're leading the youth, that's the goal. That we want all our kids to grow up and become Christians. We want them to have their own faithful Christian families, and we want them to go to heaven. And so the things that we do, the kind of involvement that we have, the way that we treat our kids and acknowledge them and respect them, as we hope that they will respect us, it all goes back to that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes adults can lose sight of that too.
Mm-hmm.
I remember very early on being in kind of a men's business meeting type thing. I was a high schooler. They brought us in just to give us some experience, which is actually commendable that they did
Yeah.
that, because they're kind of doing what we just are saying to do, is to involve youth and to bring them in, to usher them in. But one of the things that struck me as a teen was all we talked about was the buildings in this men's business meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the only thing that was ever discussed. It was how are we going to keep the lights on, how are we going to maintain the building, how are we going to keep the grounds, and all that. And obviously all that is necessary. Like, you got to talk about all that. Like, there needs to be communication. But it just like bothered me. Like, we didn't talk anything about how we're going to reach the community, how we're going to exalt the name of Jesus, how we ourselves are going to grow closer to Jesus, and how we're going to train our kids to grow closer to Jesus. Now, obviously, that was, if you asked anybody in the room, those were the goals.
Yeah.
However, it just wasn't part of our conversation. And so sometimes I think adults, when they're plugged into their various tasks that they have in ministry, whether it be the sound, whether it be the building maintenance, whether it be they're in charge of a particular event that happens
Mm-hmm.
each year, like a VBS, it's really easy, because we're human beings, to just see those things as tasks that need to be completed.
Yep.
And even if you do train someone, You're just training them to do a task that needs to be completed without the vision of, like, we're serving Jesus. We're the hands and feet of Jesus when we're doing these
Yeah.
things. We're, if everything goes wrong, it's fine if we have exalted the name of Jesus, right? And
Yeah.
I think we lose sight of that. And, our youth aren't going to see that if that's not forefront for the adults. And that's obviously also a part of the responsibility of leadership to keep that at the forefront. Like, hey, this is all about Jesus. These tasks might be stressful at times, but we're not here to just keep the building open. In fact, it's, that's not the goal at all. The goal is to preach Jesus, right? And so anyways, I think, that has to, for it to be Christ-centered, starts with the adults and should trickle down for the youth. Like, we're not training them to do these tasks just to accomplish them for the sake of accomplishing them.
Right. And I'll never forget what a parent said to me the first time during one of my youth internships while I was going to Freed. I had made a big calendar, and I had kind of talked about with some of the parents, like, what I was going to do, and all of this stuff. And one of the parents said, "You keep them busy." Like, and I mean, but it was the way that it came out was kind of like they just want their kid to be doing something during the summer. I mean, yeah, so what that parent, unfortunately, and I think what we all do sometimes, if we can't keep that focus, and we do lose focus sometimes, is it's not being involved simply for the sake of being involved. When we talk about involvement, there's a purpose for that, and there's a purpose behind why we want the involvement. There's a if your congregation has fellowship meals, right? The purpose of the fellowship meal is not so that we can all eat really good once a month. The purpose of that is to build up the fellowship of the brethren, to enjoy the company of each other, all together in one place. And for what purpose is that? Why do we want to be closer to one another? Because are we not striving to attain the unity in Christ and the Spirit of God? Ephesians chapter 4. Is that not what we're trying to accomplish? So, I mean, we do have to recognize the Christ-centeredness behind our mission with the youth and all ministry. So,
absolutely.
All right, so we're going to have a mid-roll, and we are going to jump in with the remainder of our time. We're just going to kind of shoot off some ideas that we have for different age groups. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for watching or listening today. We thank you for checking out this podcast. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble. You can also listen to our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Just search for Bearing Up on those places. We want to acknowledge the Ministry League. We are part of the Ministry League Network, and we are excited to be a part of that network. It's a lot of Christian resources that they offer. The network itself is a group of podcasters and a group of individuals that provide Christian resources. And you can go on the Ministry League app and find a library that Bearing Up is included in, as well as a lot of other podcasts. So check out the Ministry League app or their website, ministryleague.com, and check out the Bearing Up shop. There's a lot of great premium products there that you can purchase to support this work. We've got mugs, sweatshirts, and t-shirts, and all kinds of other things. We have, of course, Bearing Up apparel, but we also have our Rep Your Convictions product line that you can check out. And thank you so much for putting up with this mid-roll, and we'll get back into our discussion. So let's jump back into our discussion. Again, with the remainder of our time, we're just going to kind of shoot off some things that we think would be great age appropriate things that kids can do um, in regards to ministering. We're going to begin with elementary school age. Um, the cradle roll is probably not. You're probably not going to get much out of the cradle roll. So, but you probably get involved. Some preschoolers and elementary school age is probably a good group to begin doing some types of ministry. So,
Yeah.
one thing that we have done here is, as mentioned before, uh, kids can write cards, and you can have a ministry where once a month they just make a bunch of cards, and you can use them to send out to people that are ill, sick. One of the things that I involved one of our youth, and maybe you can do a rotation. And I had this idea, maybe that we'll start doing it. Um, we had a little token gift for our mothers on Mother's Day, and he stood with me. He's 6, and he stood with me, and I had the basket of this little. There were pins, and I would give him a pin and tell him who to give that to, and he would go up and he would hand it to that mother, and so that was a way of sort of involving him. It was kind of an on the fly thing, but maybe we start doing that with the bulletin. The congregation has a bulletin, and you have an adult greeter, but you could have a junior greeter and I think everybody loves a small child smiling face saying good morning, and handing the bulletin. And so that's something that's giving them a responsibility. They feel good about it. And I think everybody just ends up feeling good about it when they do something like that. So that's a couple ideas that I had. Maybe I'll come up with some
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah. For elementary, all the ones that you said, absolutely. To add to the Mother's Day one, something we did here was my wife sat down with some of the elementary and middle school, and they made the crafts. They made a craft, some kind of gift for the mothers, and then they also passed them out. So, but they also, there was a day where they got together and like made whatever it was, and so that was a task that involved them. They felt really good about. They were excited about, and each craft was actually, it was something they got to custom. It was earrings, and they were able to customize the colors and all that. And so they really felt like they put their mark on it. You saw some pretty interesting colors, I'll say that. But and then nursing homes is big. Taking the elementary to visit the nursing homes, take them with adults, of course, taking them to visit some shut-ins.
Mm-hmm.
And to spend time. The shut-ins would love that. People who are stuck at home, whether it be older or because of health reasons, and when you can, of course, because like I said, with health reasons, incredibly encouraging that everybody loves kids. Everybody loves to have that around. Of course, probably, know your people too. Know who,
Yeah.
If that wouldn't be received well, then you should know that as the minister or whatever. But so that can be another area of an involvement. You want to move to middle school?
Yeah. Before we do, we another thing that you can do is you can start getting them into Last the Leaders. Different things like that. And that's another way of kind of training them up for leadership and stuff like that. I feel like that's more of older kids when you start to get to middle school and high school. But you can start, and you may not be able to do competitions or stuff with especially younger ones. But they have good material, and you have things like that. We're trying to do some things like that because we have such a big group that are elementary school age kids. They get up and they learn how to do prayer and lead singing and things like that, and leading singing on singing night. That's a good thing to kind of. They feel that's they feel valued, and they feel like they're doing something of value when you do things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Start getting them involved, doing scripture reading early, all that, those type of things. If there's ladies class, same thing with the little girls and all that.
mm-hmm.
Get them involved, practicing doing those type of things. Something you triggered a thought is make sure to get them to camp. Get
Yeah.
them to camp. I'm telling you, man. I didn't grow up going to camp. Started in high school. I wish I would have grown up. I went when I was real little, and then there's a big gap. It may not have been little league years, but that go to camp. Yeah, miss the ball game. You won't regret it. I
Yeah.
mean, man.
I did want to say about
And
the
a
visiting
lot of those,
people
I
too.
mentioned those college.
Do what?
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Oh, I should say, and a lot of those college kids that I mentioned were kids who had grown up going to that camp as well,
yeah.
and so they felt invested, they felt involved, and they all love coming back to that each year. It's just a hallmark for them.
Yeah.
You mentioned the nursing home.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to what you were talking about, like going to visit the sick or the nursing homes and things like that. You might have to look into, like, if you got a really big group, you might have to let the nursing home know ahead of time. Uh,
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you if you have like just a few, it'd probably be fine. And I would probably avoid hospitals at elementary school age. Um, you know, depending on the situation. Uh, if they're really young and there's IVs and wires and all things like that, and it's sometimes the situation can be kind of hard. You might have
Hmm.
individuals in your congregation that are, or they've been members for a long time and they're a lot older. And I can think of several people on my mind that are not there mentally, and that would be a hard
Hmm.
thing. I think
Yep.
for younger kids. So you really you have to think about what you're doing in that regard. I know that's probably common sense. I probably don't even need to say it, but I don't know. You got to think about
Yeah.
what you're
Good
doing.
point. Good point.
So
Yep. Know your people. Yep.
all right, so let's talk about middle school. They're a little bit older, and they can do a little bit more than what elementary school can do. Um, and I'll let you start this one up.
Okay. Middle school. A lot of them are, especially most youth groups are sixth grade and above or seventh grade and above, and so starting to get them involved in some of the things that the youth group's doing. They can start doing the yard work and the raking leaves and all that, those type of things. We had some middle schoolers out on our work day um, doing. One was power washing, so they can do a lot more than you would think
Yeah,
at the middle school age, especially upper middle school, like eighth grade or so. And so there's a lot that they can do. Um, all the landscaping on those work days, those are good. You're kind of doing it with all the other older members there with you too. And we just had ours, and it was, the middle schoolers are right there, right with us, and it was a good time. And it's a bonding time too. We had to rip up some bushes, so we had some side by sides and some trucks there to, take the rope and the chain and to pull the bushes out, and they got a real kick out of that. Like I think that meant a lot to them to see the adults kind of having fun and ripping bushes out of the ground and stuff.
yeah,
Kind of YouTube videos of you'll see with that, but they enjoyed that. They got to be a part of that and enjoyed it. So just like work days in general, uh, of course, visitation with them too. And let's go ahead and just say the nursing home thing can go with all of these.
yeah,
Like all that's very all age appropriate. So I won't use that example again. And at the point of middle school, you're kind of getting at least some domestic missions, right? They can do some things
hmm
here. If your church does mission trips, I think you're getting to that age that would be appropriate and could do a lot for them. And of course, elementary too. If your parents are along on one of these trips, but I wasn't kind of our joke with Haiti earlier. I was just saying that as a joke. But of course, if you're with your parent, whatever. But I'm talking about where you're just with the youth group or something.
just flying
So
with them.
yeah. And so you kind of can gauge you can start going on some trips at middle school with the youth group, whether that be like Rush or some other youth rally. That was kind of when I was, Maple Bell. The work I was at last is when I started taking them on trips, was kind of middle school. And yeah, so I guess off the top of my head, that's what I got. What do you got, man?
Yeah, I think those are all great. And I think that is when you really feel, and when they really feel like they're doing something good, when they are doing some, whether it is we're telling people about the gospel, we're telling people about Jesus with the mission work, or we're really helping somebody with a service project. I feel like sometimes though those events can be, they're spread out. You may not have, once a month, a service project at somebody's house. You may not have that many houses to go
Mm-hmm.
to, to do something like that. So those service projects might be few and far between. And so I'm just kind of racking my head right now about what could middle schoolers do, um, on the regular, to kind of to help out with the congregation, or help out, because I was thinking about like elementary school kids, they can kind of help hand out bulletins and stuff. I'm thinking, what
Oh,
can the middle schoolers do? Maybe they could clean up after fellowship meals. They could kind of clear the tables and wipe the
yeah.
tables. That's probably more regular sometimes. Um, you,
De-
do what?
Depending on the size of the church and how complicated it would be, you can start bringing them in the tech room
Yeah,
and help out with that. I did in middle school, but we had a fairly simple setup. Our congregation about 100, so you
yeah,
get up to like 1,000 member congregation, it's going to be a more complex system and it'd be more difficult. But especially at our smaller congregations, they can start learning how to click the slides, or start learning how to turn things on, get things set up, or whatever for the morning.
hmm,
So press record if you're recording the lesson in some way, whatever it is. They can start learning how to do those things, start learning how to, like, again, we have a fairly simple camera setup, and every once in a while, we've got some middle schoolers who will come up and, I want to turn off the camera, I want to turn on the camera. And so anyways, they'll do that, and I'll let them do it and we put ours away each time. It's not a permanent setup. It's more of like a movable camera on a a mic stand, and so they help tear it down each time. So there's things like that. So
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Uh, there are things to be done, and I think sometimes, like, you, especially, I feel like ministers, there's things that you do. Like that.
yep.
I have to set up our live stream every time, right now. But somebody else could just as
Hmm.
easily do it, and it could be a
Yep.
job that you could maybe give to a middle school or a high school student. Um, and
Yep.
so, well, let's move to high school then,
Yeah.
and
They know what
unless,
they're doing for sure.
yeah, oh yeah, I mean, really,
Eh,
they're coming up in an age where I mean, they know what computers are, and they know what to do, and they yeah, they're in the classroom. I mean, computers in the classroom all the time, so I mean, they're
Yep.
they're used to that
Yep.
stuff.
Ours is all basically run on the phone too. So I
There
mean,
you go.
hey, so that's kind of our plan, is to start ushering in some high schoolers at least. So that leads us into high school there.
Yeah, let's go
But
ahead.
it but they're obviously very apt to do that. So any technology, say you want to run your Facebook page or Instagram, whatever it is, that's a way to get high schoolers involved. You may not want to just give it to them. You might want an older adult on there as well, so they can monitor it all
Yeah,
and kind of make sure there's just not anything accidentally done, or something just posted, kind of be funny, immature,
yeah.
something like that.
You have to be very
Keep it
careful
in
about who
check.
you choose to do that. But yeah,
Yeah, you do. But there's some very mature high schoolers out
yeah.
there, who have the capabilities, or at least consult them. Like, hey, what are some of the images? Can you pick out some scripture images for us to be
Find a
posting?
Bible
Like,
meme.
they're going to be probably better. Yeah, they're going to be better at that than probably our older adults, because they know what looks good. Hey, why don't we allow our high schoolers or even young adults to help design the website? All right, because
Yeah.
I have a feeling our older adults don't know what looks good on a website, and the younger are going to be more
Mm.
apt to know that. Um, Other high school things, all right, you're definitely getting into the time where they're able to do real work. I think some more mature high schoolers, especially with parent, in line with parent approval and all that, are ready to even do some international missions. I know plenty of high schoolers that have done that. Yeah, so that all opens up on a weekly basis. Some things. You've got some high schoolers who are going to start doing some sermons,
Hmm.
start teaching Bible classes. both guys and girls teaching kids Bible classes. I taught some kids Bible classes in high school too. So that's all kind of getting opened up. Something we really push at our week of camp is junior counselors. We'll always have a bunch of junior counselors because we realize that's gonna be our cream of the crop for who we want as counselors here in a couple of years when they graduate. And so opening up those opportunities for them to come, and they're basically counselors. They just don't have as much they don't have any disciplinary authority over any of the
Right.
campers, but
Yeah.
they do all the same tasks as counselors do. And yeah, so high school really starts opening it up that pretty much anything an adult can do, a high schooler can.
Yeah.
The only difference would
Anything
be
that's
you
not
really have to monitor
administrative.
the appropriateness.
Right.
Yeah,
Anything that's not
you just
particularly
and
administrative, but I mean, they could do, pretty much whatever.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, one thing I didn't mention for middle school, high school, middle school or high school is counting. Counting if
oh
you
yeah.
keep a record of attendance. Oh, that our middle schoolers do that. They go and count, and our high schoolers do too. They'll be the people who count, collect the cards or whatever it is up and
Yeah.
down the aisles. So yeah.
Right. Um, yeah. There's so much that high schoolers can do, and maybe if they're not ready to teach right away, they can be a teaching assistant. They can be kind of
Yep.
thrown in somewhere where they are kind of working and you know um, kind of seeing how things work, and eventually you want to get them to where they can be teachers as well. But like, I mean, you can
Yep.
do things to kind of ease them in, and you know, um,
Yep.
I think that your ideas about the tech stuff. I think that's a great regular thing that you could do. Um, you know, uh, I think that training. I think high school is when you can start. You can really start to delegate, and this is your job, and this is kind of a thing that you can do. And there's good oversight over that, and there's good communication and partnership. But if you've been working with them from middle school and high school, and you can say, uh, hey, this is an area of work. I'm trying to think of particulars because we're trying to share ideas here. But
Mm-hmm.
what are some particulars like? Maybe it's you know trying to get to know the congregation um, through different means. And if you got where the high school, because a lot of the times what happens is you got the youth group and they know each other really well, but they don't know sister so and so that's 72 years old, and they couldn't tell you what her name is. You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe there's some things that you can do to kind of um, help that, because after high school, they're adults, you know, and I
Yep.
mean that lovingly, but
Yeah.
uh, but they're part of the congregation, and they are in high school, they're in middle school, elementary, they're still part of the congregation, but I think that even more so they feel like they belong to the whole unit. That we want to instill that, we want to encourage that, and so maybe something that they could do is you give them a list of some of the older folks, and they just try to check and see if they're there on Sunday morning. Sunday morning is the time that they're there. And you give them a little list, and maybe it's like, I don't know, 5 or 6 people that are kind of here or there depending on how they feel, and you could say, all right, so if they're not there, somebody needs to give them a call and check on them. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
they can do that. Maybe they can say,
Yep.
hey, we missed you, and we love you, and that's all it really has to be. But they're doing something. They've got ownership over a particular thing that can really encourage. Helps them to be accountable. Helps there's lots of things along those lines that you could do to try to encourage. And maybe that's something that you could probably even do with the young adult group too. So
Mm-hmm.
let's wrap up with that. They're the young adults. maybe they're, college students or even after college a little bit. And, they can be fully accountable. They can be fully, you know, they can be fully involved. Um, they can drive. you know,
Yeah.
they can lead.
I think so. I'm thinking like this is like college to like late 20s
Or yeah, I mean, yeah, you could
or
say
30s.
late 20s, mid 20s.
Okay. Yeah. So I think this is the group that we probably undersell a lot
Yeah,
because we don't know what to do with them,
right.
and there's a lot of tasks, especially this, and you're getting into like usually once again 30s. It's like okay, they're recognized as the member that you would give pretty much anything to. But I would even say at this time in the 20s, this is when a lot of young people have a lot of vision, a lot of excitement, and a lot of energy
Mm-hmm.
before a lot of times before they have kids and all of that. And I think we underutilize them. I would go back to churches do really bad on social media, really bad
Yeah,
usually.
yeah,
And this would be we mentioned high school, but this would be an area you could give to a young adult with less supervision, someone you trust, just like you would any like someone in their 40s you would trust too. Except for the young adult is going to know what to do, right? They're going to know they understand social media, believe me,
mm-hmm.
much better than a 40-year-old running the social media stuff. If you still need supervision as far as like spending ads or whatever, then that's fine. But I think you need to involve them in that way because that's where their skills. They literally grew up. We all grew up with phones in our hands. Us probably closer to like middle school, high school is when we got ours. Now it's starting like
Yeah,
early elementary and all of that. Like they know how to use social media, know how to use phones, get young adults involved in the tech. That's going to be the things that they're interested in. They're capable of. They know how to use it. I would say we need to do a better job at utilizing our young adults and kind of young married couples
mm-hmm.
in designing our buildings, like designing rooms, renovating, because so many times, like we spend all this money to renovate something, and I say this in love, but it looks like a funeral home,
Yeah,
and it's because, but it's an out of style. It's like now we
yeah,
spent all this money and we still look like it's out of style. But man, what an awesome way to involve the young people. Like
mm-hmm.
they're all flipping their houses right now.
Yeah,
Like they're taking old houses and making them look brand new. Young people just have that ability.
mm-hmm.
They know they're watching the shows. They know what looks good. You're going to give that task to somebody. So why not give it to someone who's going to make it look modern? There's nothing wrong with looking modern, right?
Mm.
Every building that's ever been built looked modern at one time, hopefully when it was first built.
Yeah,
Sometimes new buildings still look like they're from the 70s, right? But because depending on who designed it.
right.
And I don't say that to be rude. I'm just saying there's a skill set that younger people, and that's one of the skill sets younger people tend to have. Not to say, I'm speaking so generally here. Like I'm not, obviously there's older people who are really good with design and all of that. But just generally involve some younger people. Say, how would you design this? Even if ultimately they're not going to be the ones going out and shopping and getting the product, at least involve
Yeah,
them, get a committee, involve them in the process. And I think they would feel really valued. Because when I talk to young adults, obviously this is not a Christ-centered issue, like, whether or not what the building looks like. But one of the things young people will often talk about is just how out of date the building is.
yeah,
And so involve them in that.
yeah.
That's obviously something they're passionate about.
Right.
And I think things will look a lot better.
Yeah, and you made a good point. When you said the word committee, I was like, oh yeah, because a kid that has gone up through the youth program, they know what's good. They know what's needs work. They can be the consultants now. As okay, what do you think that we need to do with our youth program? They can be, maybe you have a youth committee and you've got. They just jump in. They join in. Whether they are young married, and can offer the input of growing up in the group, but also now having a young one. or maybe they're not married, but they're a young adult, and they can kind of tell from their experience, and get involved in that way. Um, to work with the elders, to work with the leadership, and I was thinking, all right, what was I doing in my early 20s? And I was doing youth internships, so like that's
Hmm.
not something, beyond. I mean, I did a youth internship with 1 year of Bible education. So, I mean, like,
Uh-huh.
that's something,
Yeah.
the things that youth interns do is something that young 20s can do. You don't have to
Yep.
have, a lot of experience doing it. You can just say, well, what would be a good idea for the kids to do? And so you can kind
Yep.
of say, all right, we want to give you a role here, and maybe you have a youth minister, but maybe you can have somebody, an associate youth minister, unpaid, just a position that that somebody can come in, or maybe you have a junior. Maybe the youth committee is just made up of of young marrieds and young adults, and you have an elder that comes in and just he
Hmm.
kind of you know shares the ideas with the other elders, and he just kind of is a silent ear, listening to sort of the plans and some of the things that they want to do. And um,
Yeah.
so there's a lot. I feel like we've only scratched the surface with all of this, but I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
there's.
Young adults can serve as good mentors, and
Yeah.
as far as bringing them in the program, it's invaluable for the like for teens, for youth to have mentors that are older, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
the intergenerational ministry. But I think it's also valuable for them to have someone just who has recently gone through what they have gone through and have been faithful. Uh, can be valuable for them to be able to build those relationships. And I apologize, there's a bit of a lag, so there's a couple times where it seems like to me you're done with what you're saying, and then it moves on, so I apologize.
It's all right. It'll all work out in editing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to add, or anything that we've failed to mention in this? Um, I think one thing that I just was thinking about is, you know, what a blessing it would be if, you know, from a very young age and continuing on through, through middle school and high school. Uh, what if kids had a really really good relationship with the elders and with the preacher?
Hmm.
So you know they should be involved in these things as well. I feel like sometimes the elders are like, well, I've got all of these shut-ins that I need to focus on, and I've got all of this other work and this shepherding with these people that are coming in, and I've got all these problems, and it's very easy to hand off the kids to, the young people or the youth minister, just hand them off, youth deacon, um, but they need to be involved in that too. But anything else you wanted to add or say, about any of this?
No, man, I appreciate you inviting me. It's always an honor to sit and talk with you.
Yeah, yeah, I've really enjoyed it. This is a longer episode, and that's fitting because this is the final episode of season 4, and I just really appreciate having you on, man. It's always good to have discussions, and maybe hopefully I'll get to have you on next season too.
Yeah, yeah, man. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, we're gonna have a prayer, and Noah has our servant spotlight today. So right after our prayer, he's gonna tell you who the servant spotlight is, and kind of highlight an individual that has really shown a servant heart. So please stick around for that. Uh, let's go to God in prayer. God, we thank you so much for this discussion that Noah and I have had, and that we've been able to share with our listeners. And we ask your Lord that you'll help us to be encouraged to do the work of ministry wherever we are, whatever roles that we have. Um, Help us to understand that there is a need, and that need can only be met if we are proactive in the way that we set out to do these things, dear Lord. And I pray the discussion that we've had has inspired both of us and our listeners to some good ideas as some things that we can do to help our youth. And we ask your Lord that, again, regardless of where our roles are and how we are involved with the youth, help us to keep Christ in the center of all that we do. We thank you so much for his sacrifice for us. We thank you for the blessings that we have because of him. We thank you for the hope of heaven that we have in Christ, because we may be washed in his blood. Ask your Lord that you'll be with anyone who is not a Christian that's listening. Inspire them to become one and obey the gospel. I thank you so much for Noah. I ask that you will bless him in his work, his ministry, that you'll bless his family, that you will continue to guide him and watch over him as we both continue in the work of ministry. We thank you so much again, Lord, for all the blessings we have. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right.
All right, the servant spotlight. All right, so the servant spotlight this week is Brother David Riley. He is the minister for the Mars Hills Church of Christ in Bologna, Arkansas, also just outside of Conway, Arkansas. And he has done so much in this area. Like if you meet anybody in Central Arkansas, there's a good chance they know who David Riley is. He's so known here because of his servant-mindedness. He's really involved with the church camp here. He was a, central part of the creation of Camp Areopagus here in Conway, Arkansas, which is overseen by his congregation there at Mars Hill. It's really his baby that he got going and has poured his life into. It's about 6-7 years old, and that man has been part of every probably detail of that camp, making it happen. A lot of it out of his own wallet and certainly out of his time and energy. But in line with what we're talking about here today about getting youth involved, we're doing a spiritual leadership camp, which is kind of like a preaching training camp, but we're trying to market to all people. It's anybody who wants to grow spiritually, any young men. We've also got a separate week for women run by a different group. But Brother David and his wife have made it possible to make that free. And so, again, just highlighting his servant-mindedness and willing to invest in youth, as we've been talking about today. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, Noah. Again, it's good to have you on today. And we thank everyone for watching or listening today. And see you next time.